Hey guys, welcome to my first solve critique video. I'm pretty much going to critique everyone that submitted one, so this is going to end up being 2 or 3 videos, and in each one I'm probably just going to do 2 or 3 people. So this is part 1. We're going to start off with someone that you probably know. He's had a few French NRs in the past, and he might still have one for Square 1 or something. But yeah, let's get on to our first person. So in the first solution, he pretty much did the solution I would recommend to anyone, which is the CLL in green, where you just do R2, U prime, RU, R prime, and then you have assume with no AUF. So the solution was good. The only thing I'd recommend is sort of, he had his hands moving around a lot, like right before he was about to put them on the stack mat. I usually try to, like, if I'm going to wipe off my hands or something or stretch, I try to do that before you start inspection, because doing it like really close to when you start the timer, it usually like throws off your starts a lot. Like, I like to sort of envision what I'm gonna do, and then sort of put my hands on like this, and I visualize it more, and that helps me have better starts. I just noticed that sometimes, like, if when you put it down at the last minute and put your hands on, you usually have worse starts. So that's just the thing I would recommend, is to, like, at the end of inspection, just be a little bit more calmer, but that also might just be because it was practice. So in the solve, he's decided to do a 3-move to blue CLL. So R prime U, R2, and then over here we just have a sexy sledge and some AUF and stuff. And that's a fine solution, but really you can do something much better on white, I would say. The most obvious thing here is that you can do 3 moves and you get this case. And a few people did that, but they did kind of a different algorithm than I would use in this case that would lead to a cancellation. So on 3x3, well, on 2x2, you can use an algorithm that's commonly used on 3x3 to solve this case, which is something like this. So that would solve in that case. Now here, since we start off sort of doing that from the back, we can continue the alg and do this cancellation. So it's the same alg I just showed, but executed from the back, and that leads to a really nice cancellation. So that, I think, it's just like 8 moves there. But you don't even have to do that. The other thing you can do on this white is, instead of inserting it direct 3 moves like that, you can do a U and then insert, and then right again you have a soon and no AOF. So that would probably be a better solution than what he did, and that's what I would recommend. He locked up a little, but generally I would recommend doing one of those 2 CLL solutions I just showed. Even if you don't do the cancellation, you can still get a good time with just doing a normal algorithm. So in this one, I don't think he really found any solution he was that happy with during inspection, but what he ended up doing was orange. So for orange, if you did these 4 moves, you're going to end up with an EG2 face here, which I don't think he really liked. So he decided to just turn it into a CLL just by doing something like this: U prime, R prime, UR, B2, R2. And then from there, he just finished it off with the CLL after he had paused for a while, though. One thing that you can do here, in that case, when you can't really one-look a solution, you want to try to go for CLL as much as you can, obviously. So in that case, that was good. He knows EG1 at least, so going for CLL in that case is better. There's a few other things that you could have done on that solve, though. Probably my panic solution would have been to do something on blue, because when I kind of do a panic solution, I know I'm not going to one look. I try to make the end of it sort of 2gen, or just make the solution 2gen as possible, even if it's longer. So I notice on blue, I can kind of pair up like this, and then do that piece, and then I can finish the rest of this 2gen, and then just kind of deal with whatever case I have. And so that might have been a little better in that case. So this next scramble is pretty interesting because on red here from this angle, we can get two pretty nice EG2 cases. I'm sorry, EG1 cases. But we have to rotate to solve them, sort of, if you don't know LEG1. So the only really thing that you could do without rotating is something like this, and that's not as good of a case as the others. So what he ended up doing on this solve is just RU R prime U2 and then rotating and doing the EG1 alg, which is not a bad solution. The other thing, that's all I probably would have done, U R U2 R prime, and then rotated and done this case. I think might be a little bit faster, but really what he did was also fine. Sometimes you'll just end up having to rotate, and that's something you have to deal with. So that is something to practice now and then. So in this solve, he definitely did the best solution, I would say. On white here, you have 4 moves 2 in EG1 with, that's a really nice case. You can also cancel into it a little bit. He did lock up a little. The only recommendation I would kind of have to fix that is when I have a solution like this that's a decent amount of moves, but it's pretty fast. Usually you try to do it fast as you can, and sometimes that leads to lockups. So just on those first few moves, I try to turn pretty accurately until I'm sort of in the middle of the alg, and I can speed up a little bit and, well, be a little bit riskier. But sort of at the start, I try to be a little more controlled before I sort of start turning faster. On this one, he also did a CLL on red. It seemed like he did not really predict where the case was going to be in terms of like AUF though, and so he had a little mistake on that, but still ended up being a manageable solve. So he did like that on red, just 4 moves, and then sexy sludge again. On this one, I probably would have ended up doing a different CLL solution. I would have noticed that after I pair up these white and red pieces, I have 3 moves like that to a CLL, and then I'd probably end up canceling into it and doing something like that. And I think for me that'd be a little bit faster. What he did is also fine. I'd have to kind of compare to them to see what the speeds are. But for that one, really the only mistake he made was just not correctly one looking. So for this scramble, it looks like that part of the video actually got cut off, but it's sort of like cut off in the middle of his inspection, which was weird. But I do know like which way he was holding it, so I can kind of assume what solution he was doing, and he got a 1.8 on it, so it was a pretty decent solve. At first, he was sort of focusing on red here. There's 2 CLL layers you can do, one like that, and then another trick you can do is to also just align like this, and then you would have a different case. So he probably did one of those, is what he was planning on doing, but then he saw, and which was nice, that you can do a 2-move CLL on green here, which I was hoping he would find, because it's definitely the better solution. You can there's a few different ways to sort of hold it here. For me, I would hold it like this almost and start with a B2. Even though it's a little awkward, it saves moves on AUF, and I kind of find that important. And from that you can go into the CLL, and that would be a pretty nice solve. He definitely did that solution, I would say. I don't know what like angle he was holding it from, but he did that CLL, it looks like. So in this one, there's a lot of kind of stuff to look at, but what he ended up doing was something like R2, F prime, R prime, and then just doing a U2 and then the CLL case. But I don't think he predicted the case, so he was a little bit confused there. One thing that I would have done on that solve, well, since I didn't know what angle I was going to get here, or like what case I was going to get, and since he didn't one look on that one, I don't think, one thing I would have done, since he knew his layer was going to be like this, I actually like to execute that layer, sort of doing the F prime with this finger. So it's like R2, and then I use this finger to flick like that, and then bring it down like that. And then I go into the alg from there. And if I knew that case in AUF I would have gotten, I don't think I really would have done an angle on that solve. But that's probably the CLL I would have ended up doing, some variation of that sort of. There was a lot of other stuff to check out on that solve, but none of them really amounted to much else. Like I would have tried to make an EG1 on white there, and there's a few different options for like CLL I was kind of trying out, but none of them really led to a better case. So I would have done that same solution he did, again, just different angles and AUFs probably. So I probably would have held it like this and done like a U2 and then almost like an F prime. And then here you can sort of do whatever alg you want. Probably if you do something 2-gen, you can cancel a little bit. So maybe something like that. And that would have been a fine solution. So in this one, you had a pretty good solution. Here in white, you can just do a CLL with U prime and then F prime R U prime R2. The only thing I would change here is that he did a U2 and then F6 F prime U prime. Here I would have, it's just as easy kind of to do an F prime and then like that. And so that saves you from doing a U2. That's pretty much what I would have done for that one. It would have just saved a move, and it's about as fast as the other algorithm. So in this one, he sort of missed a pretty easy solution actually. He got a decent solve for the average, which was a 1.48. So he did like the same CLO, but like a bad angle that led to a not good cancellation or anything. So in orange here, you can do a 3 move in a few different ways, but he did it like F, U prime, R prime, and then he had to do a U prime, and then his alg. But if you hold it from this angle and do that, then you notice you can actually cancel a lot. So just doing a U2, R prime, U prime, F prime, U prime, that's a 5 mover, which is definitely saves a lot of moves, and that could have been easily a sub 1. So in that solve, when you see like a short CLO solution, try to find different ways that you can hold it and cancel a little bit. That is a frequent thing that happens, so you want to try to cancel that as much as possible, basically. So on this one, he went for the pretty obvious EG1, which is good. I probably would have done something like a U2 F prime, which is the same face he did, and then I would have done an LEG1 or something. But if you just know CLL and EG1, then that's definitely the solution you should do, is just U2 this. But I don't think he either one-looked what angle he was going to have it or something, or he just wasn't able to one-look it properly, because he definitely had a pause there. But either way, the solution he would do was fine, sort of. The other thing that he did is he decided to drop the cube onto his pants. So basically, in that scenario, I would have chosen not to do so. I'm not sure why he chose to do so, but that's just something I would avoid in the future. But besides that, that was a fine solve. So on that one, he basically just did 2 moves to seal like that. And so that wasn't bad. On here, I would almost be more tempted to do a blue PBL, because it's a pretty fast one in this case. You R prime U2, R U prime, and then with the bar in the back, you finished off like that. So I think for me, that's probably what I would have done. They're probably pretty comparable in speed, but that's just what I would have went with. Usually when I can get a PBL like that, I try to go with it. So our next solver is Ben So. We're just going to do reconstructions for this one because we don't have video. So he uses EG1 and CLL and can one-look kind of faces there around 4 and then sometimes 5 moves. He also had a question though, what order he should sort of be learning the next algorithm sets. So after EG1, I recommend learning EG2 and then LEG1. Some people switch to order of that because they think LEG1's more useful or more important or something, but I think EG2 really saves you from a lot of bad solves, and I think that's really important. Like, it's not as flashy as the other ones, but it helps you out in a lot of cases, which is really important. So that's what I would recommend learning. And then sort of after all that, you can start learning TCLL. The other thing is starting with these sets. This is when you can start sort of picking and choosing. Like if there's a case you don't think is that great, you don't really have to learn it, and you can kind of just pick what the best ones are and use them whenever you see fit. EG2, I would recommend learning the majority of at least though. So on the first solve, they did pretty much the solution I would expect, which is the green layer we showed earlier, just with soon like that. So that was good. For the second solve, they did the solution I showed earlier where you can do U and then insert like that, and then you end up with having a soon. So one thing is that that is 10 moves, and sort of the other one I showed where you cancel into this alg, that's 8 moves, so that's probably what I would have done on that solve, and it might be a little bit faster. So just sometimes, even if you know an algorithm for a case, sometimes learning a few or learning how to do like its mirror is helpful for cancellations a lot. And so that's still the solution that I would recommend for that scramble. So this is actually a pretty good solve they did where they did anti-CLL, so this is a good example. They did the same face that our previous solver did, U prime, R prime, U, R prime, and then he ended up doing R2, B2, R2 kind of to get this case. But what they did, or what Ben did here, is that he noticed you could do cancel into an anti-CLL by doing this, and then he was able to just finish off with canceling into R2 after R2. And so that was definitely a better solve, and I think that was a pretty good solution for what he knows. So in this fourth solve, Ben decided to do the rotationless option here that I mentioned earlier, where you do a U prime and then insert. And so this really isn't that bad of a case. I would still think that in this scenario, it would be better to do one of these options and then rotate, but perhaps not. The difference is probably not going to be that much, but in that case, I would have definitely just done an alg and rotated, or I would have done an LEG1 sort of thing. In this case, he also did the easy EG1 here on solve number 5. So we get, again, on the sixth solve now, we see the solution where you do F R2 U R2 to get the CLL. If I were going to do that solution actually though, which is something I might have done on that solve besides the CLL solution I mentioned earlier, I would actually probably end up doing it from the other side, something like an F, and then I'd be doing an L2, but I prefer the U prime sexy sledge U prime rather than the other AUF sort of that you would have gotten from the other side. I just think that's a little better than doing a U sexy sledge U. That's usually, I think, would make up for that doing it on the back. So I could do the U prime, because that would definitely be more comfortable and faster for me, I think. So in this solve, Ben did the 2 move on green again, doing the U2 L prime. And so in his solution, he mentioned doing the L prime and then the R. I would have tried to combine that a little, just so you could do the cancellation, something like B2, and then just go straight into the alg. But that's just sort of a small improvement you want to try, because even if it's a little awkward now, it does help in the future when you get stuff like that. Like I've had a few of those things in like significant averages where it's sort of an awkward cancellation, but at least a shorter solution and ends up being pretty fast. So for the 8th scramble, he did a U2 R prime F prime, which is probably the most comfortable layer in this situation. The one thing is that here he uses the alg double F double sexy F prime, and generally it's faster to do one of the 2-gen options. In most cases they're faster, and I find that they have more cancellations. Like on the last one, you would have been able to cancel a little bit if you had done a slightly different angle and then also done one of the algorithms. So if you had done something like this, like I showed before, you can cancel if you did a 2-gen, but doing like F double sexy F prime when it cancels in that case. And in general, I think it's just a little bit slower, but it depends on the scenario. You just keep them both in my arsenal. So on this case, they just seem to go for an EG1, doing left turns here like that. But really, if you're going to go for something like that, it's better to do R moves, and you can do basically the same thing just from the other side. So instead of starting by inserting that piece, basically, you start by inserting this piece, and then you can do it from a more comfortable angle. And I don't remember what the other case was, but it's pretty similar. One's not really better than the other, but that's definitely the better face I would do in that case if you wanted to do something like that. So in this case, they sort of did a similar EG1 face here, using white to do like this. And on this scramble, you definitely want to do the 5-move CLL solution that I showed earlier, where you do like that. So sometimes people have trouble finding that. You kind of just want to look for sort of the layer combination sort of looks like this, and it can also occur for like EG1 or something. So even when you don't have a bar that's showing up immediately, still try to look for some CLL solutions, because those are usually better than EG1s, and sometimes just easy ones can be hiding like this, and this would have been a really good solution that they would have missed. So this one again was just pretty straightforward. EG1 doing the U2L prime and then the ALG here. So here they did the CLL solution again, where you do ULU and then the assumed case. But here I would have recommended doing the URU prime and then doing the ALG and then ending with the U prime. That series of AUF is pretty much better than the other one, so it would have been a little bit faster. Once you can start one-looking cases like that, you usually have options for a few different ways to hold it, and you want to kind of consider that, like what's the best angle to hold it so it's easier to go in straight from the face, or which one's going to like reduce the amount of AUFs I have to do.